Hey, it's Mark from EndAllDisease.com, and today we're going to talk about hearing loss. When I was in grade 7, I went to a dance with a couple buddies at a roller rink in Waterloo, Ontario. It was called the Phoenix. And I noticed when I was there, I had a good time and all that, but I noticed that the music was just a little bit too loud. And I didn't really think too much of it though until the next morning when I woke up. When I woke up, my ears were foggy and everything that anyone said and all the sounds around me sounded a little bit muffled. That was my first and thankfully only experience with hearing loss, and thankfully also it was just temporary. My hearing recovered. Oh, and by the way, that roller rink, apparently the very next weekend after I was there was a fight and somebody ended up getting stabbed and they shut it down. Anyway, most of us who are blessed with good hearing take it for granted. Poor hearing is something that many people have to live with every day, and it comes at a great cost to their quality of lives and to society. If we could find a way to fix this problem, it would benefit all of us. Medicine has some temporary fixes, but has found no way to naturally restore hearing function without the use of electronic devices. But maybe that's because fixing people's hearing naturally and permanently isn't profitable. We need to keep that possibility on the table, of course. In this presentation, you're going to learn how hearing works, the root cause of hearing loss, and how hearing loss can be prevented and maybe even reversed. Be sure to stick around until the end, and I'll tell you about some of the most valuable and important nutrients for hearing, as well as the specific foods most rich in these nutrients. That way you can eat them and ensure that your hearing is as good as it possibly can be now and for the rest of your life. Okay, so this presentation I have titled How to Reverse Hearing Loss. Here we go. We're going to start with now how the ear works, how hearing works. So in studying how the ear works, I've broken it down into 3 phases that make it really as simple as possible. First phase. The unique shape of the outer ear directs sound into the auditory tube towards the eardrum. So the little hole in your head leading up to the eardrum, that's phase 1. And all the way up to the eardrum, that is phase 1. Behind the eardrum are 3 tiny bones. They are the smallest bones in the human body, called the malleus, incus, and stapes. So 3 little tiny bones. This is actually phase 2, so we'll get on to that now. Phase 2, second phase. Once the sound reaches the eardrum and the bones behind it work in a piston-like fashion to amplify the sound and transfer it into the fluid inside a snail-looking organ called the cochlea. By the time the sound reaches the cochlea, and this is where it gets really amazing, if you thought the outside of the ear was a marvel in engineering, this may be even greater. The sound pressure, by the time it passes the eardrum and the 3 little bones, the sound pressure is 22 times greater than when it first arrived. That sound is then transferred into the bag of water-like organ called the cochlea. Looks like a snail. And so it reverberates through the water, and that brings us to the third phase. The third phase of sound is the sound travels through the watery substance inside of the cochlea until it reaches tiny hair cells called stereocilia. The hair cells convert the mechanical stimulation into electrical signals, which are then sent through the neurons to the brain. So there you go, 3 phases. Sound enters your ear all the way up to the point of the eardrum. When it reaches the eardrum, that whole system there, the mechanical leverage system with the 3 tiniest bones of your body and the drum together, they work to amplify that sound 22 times greater and move it along into another organ called the cochlea, and it travels through the watery substance in the cochlea until it reaches the hair cells. And those hair cells are the critical juncture in the hearing process, because that's where it converts the mechanical sound into electrical signals, which can be interpreted by the brain. Causes of hearing loss. Hearing loss can be inherited. Some people are born with it, but most times it's caused by other factors. So here are the 3 most common types of hearing loss that we're going to focus on in this presentation. Loud noise, or in scientific circles they'd like to call that noise-induced hearing loss, is usually painless and occurs progressively over time. Extreme loud noises like explosions can cause sudden hearing loss. An estimated 26 million people in the US have high-frequency noise-induced hearing loss. That's 15% of the population. Another cause of hearing loss is ototoxic medications, or you could just say toxic medications. Many or most of the medications that come from the pharmaceutical industry are toxic and do come with side effects, and sometimes those side effects are hearing loss. Certain medications can cause hearing loss. For example, chemotherapy drugs, or certain antibiotics like streptomycin, neomycin, and kanamycin. A lot of people don't know this, but radiotherapy instantly causes hearing loss in many of its patients. I think if many people understood that and the doctors told them that potential side effect, they might not actually get the treatment. The other type of hearing loss we're going to focus on is called age-related hearing loss. We've all seen older people struggle to hear things. To the person with age-related hearing loss, speech may begin to sound muffled or unclear. So we know these are the three causes of hearing loss, but what are the mechanisms behind this? So we're going to go deeper into this. Three causes. Let's look at what's happening inside the body that causes the hearing loss. For all three types of hearing loss that we just mentioned, the cause appears to be the exact same. And right now I'm going to read to you 5 quotes from 5 different studies on hearing loss. We have recorded from inner and outer hair cells in the guinea pig cochlea during and after exposure to intense tones. Our results show functional changes in the hair cells that may explain the origin of noise-induced hearing loss. Next quote. Exposure to intense sound or ototoxic drugs may damage the outer hair cells, thus drastically changing both mechanical and electrophysiological responses of the inner ear. Next quote. Auditory hair cell degeneration is the most common cause of hearing loss in humans. The classical pathology of noise-induced hearing loss is destruction of auditory hair cells. Are you starting to see a pattern here? And the final quote. The primary cause of hearing loss, this one's blunt and right to the point, includes damage to cochlear hair cells. So there you have it. Of all the things that need to happen in order for hearing to occur, those cochlear hair cells are the weakest link. They're fragile, they're delicate, and they are the first things to go. Converting sound waves to electrical signals happens to be done by the most fragile structures involved in hearing. When they are damaged, hearing quality is reduced. Interestingly, according to mainstream theory, auditory cochlear hair cells cannot regenerate or be regenerated, and hearing loss is irreversible. But is it? Let's find out. Now we're going to go a little bit deeper even. In hearing loss, why do the cochlear hair cells die? So we know loud sound or toxic medication or age can damage these hair cells. What's happening inside the hair cells that causes the damage? So why do the cochlear hair cells die? Now we're going to go over 4 more quotes from 4 different studies. Here we go. Although details of the aging process differ in various organisms, there is a common understanding that oxidative stress and the mitochondrial dysfunction play a major part in aging. The auditory system is no exception. Reactive oxygen species, which are free radicals, increase with age, and it is known that oxidative stress and associated mitochondrial dysfunction play an important role in aging and age-related diseases. Underlying the classic set of cochlear pathologies that occur as the result of noise exposure are increased levels of reactive oxygen species that play a significant role in noise-induced hair cell death. Both necrotic and apoptotic cell death have been identified in the cochlea. Last quote. The important role of oxidative stress and mitochondrial dysfunction in the development of age-related hearing loss has been established by reviewing previous studies. So there you have it. Hearing loss is caused by oxidative stress and mitochondrial dysfunction within the cells that comprise the hairs inside the cochlea. And therefore, hearing loss is a metabolic condition. There's lots of studies that look for genetic reasons for hearing loss. They're always looking for genetic reasons because then you can develop a drug that switches on or off each gene. So it's a profitable way of looking at it. And most studies that are funded are genetic based. However, many studies on the metabolic nature of hearing have been done as well. And the cause of hearing loss has now been established. Although hearing loss can have a number of external causes such as excessive noise, poison, or aging, ultimately they all damage hearing the same way. The external stressor causes hair cells to release nitric oxide, which binds to the enzyme cytochrome C oxidase within cells shutting down oxygen use and efficient energy production, which causes free electrons or free radicals to escape from the electron transport chain, causing damage to the mitochondria. Hearing loss is caused by damage to the highly sensitive hair cells contained within the cochlea. When the cells die, hearing fails. So, the free radical theory of hearing loss, although it's very well established with overwhelming evidence, we're still going to call it a theory because that's what it is. And if it is true, then what if we administer the opposite of these free radicals, a reactive oxygen species, which is an antioxidant? Can antioxidants be used to prevent it from occurring? That's what we're going to look at now. As it turns out, there have been many studies on this. When administered to animals prior to loud noise exposure, all of the following antioxidants have been shown to prevent hearing loss: glutathione, D-methionine, epsilon, resveratrol, vitamin C, coenzyme Q10, salicylate, and N-acetylcysteine. Furthermore, treatment up to 3 days after loud noise exposure was also able to reduce hearing loss to various degrees. So let's say you're going to the club and it's going to be really loud that night. If you take a whole bunch of vitamin C, not too much. If you take, let's say, like a gram of vitamin C, maybe 2, any more than that, you could get diarrhea. So that could be a disaster. But if you precondition your body with a bunch of vitamin C and you load it up, it actually will reduce the chances of you getting hearing loss from it. For the next 3 days, there's a window of opportunity where you can take antioxidants and reduce and reverse some of the damage that was caused. So antioxidants, according to the research, administered both before and after loud noise can prevent and reverse hearing loss. How about red light therapy? Light in the red and near infrared ends of the spectrum accelerate healing in all cells and tissues. One of the ways they accomplish this is by acting as potent antioxidants. So red light's an antioxidant. It also inhibits nitric oxide production. So since both of those things we know are involved in hearing loss or damage to the cells that cause hearing loss, in theory, this is a great candidate to test on hearing loss. The question is, can red and near infrared light prevent or reverse hearing loss? Let's look at some studies on it now, starting with prevention. In a 2016 study, researchers applied near infrared light to auditory cells in vitro, which, if you don't know, means outside of the organism. So basically cells in a petri dish. So they applied the light to the cells before placing them under oxidative stress by exposing them to various poisons. After exposing the preconditioned cells to chemotherapy poison and another poison called endotoxin, study researchers found that the light altered the mitochondrial metabolism and oxidative stress response for up to 24 hours post-treatment. We report a decrease of inflammatory cytokines and stress levels resulting from near-infrared applied to auditory cells before treatment with gentamicin, which is the chemotherapy drug, or lipopolysaccharide, which is called endotoxin. And the results of the study showed that pre-treatment with near-infrared light reduced pro-inflammatory markers associated with increased reactive oxygen species and nitric oxide. Therefore, near-infrared light administered before chemical poisoning can prevent the release of factors that lead to hearing loss. So that's very promising. Now we need to look at what happens inside the organism. Study number 1. Can red light therapy reverse hearing loss? The effect of near-infrared light on hearing loss following chemotherapy administration was evaluated in mice. Hearing was assessed following gentamicin administration and again 10 days after light therapy. The effect of near-infrared light on hearing loss following chemotherapy poisoning was evaluated. Hearing was assessed following gentamicin administration and again after 10 days of light therapy. On scanning electron microscopic images, low-level laser therapy significantly increased the number of hair cells in middle and basal turns. Hearing was significantly improved by laser radiation. After low-level laser therapy treatment, both the hearing threshold and hair cell count significantly improved. So the near-infrared light made the hair cells regrow and improved the hearing at the same time. Near-infrared light administered after chemical poisoning can regrow cochlear hair cells and restore hearing in mice. Study number 2. In this study, rats were exposed to intense noise in both ears. Afterwards, the right ears were irradiated with near-infrared light for 30-minute treatments every day for 5 days. So the results of the study were as follows. Measurement of the auditory brainstem response revealed an accelerated recovery of auditory function in the groups treated with low-level lasers compared with the non-treated groups at days 2, 4, 7, and 14 after noise exposure. Morphological observations also revealed a significantly higher outer hair cell survival rate in the low-level laser therapy groups. Looking for indicators of oxidative stress and apoptosis in untreated versus treated cells, researchers found strong immunoreactivities in the inner ear tissues of the non-treatment group, whereas these signals were decreased in the low-level laser therapy group. Our findings suggest that low-level laser therapy has cytoprotective effects against noise-induced hearing loss via the inhibition of nitric oxide expression and apoptosis. There you have it. Next study. In a 2012 study, 9 rats were exposed to loud noise, and the use of near-infrared light on hearing recovery was tested. The day after loud noise exposure, the left ears of the rats were treated with near-infrared light for 60 minutes for 12 days in a row. The right ears were left untreated and were considered the control group. After the 12th irradiation, hearing threshold was significantly lower for the left ears compared to the right ears. When observed using an electron microscope, the number of auditory hair cells in the treated ears was significantly greater than in of the untreated ears. Our findings suggest that low-level laser irradiation promotes recovery of hearing threshold after acute acoustic trauma. There you go. So once again, the exact same thing happened. The hair cells were protected and the hearing improved. So now we're on to the second last section of this presentation, red light therapy versus tinnitus. So tinnitus, if you don't know, is a condition marked by constant ringing of the ears. Mainstream theory can't really explain why tinnitus occurs. Authors of one study wrote the following: due to large number of causes and limited knowledge of its pathophysiology, tinnitus still remains an obscure symptom. The most likely theory for the cause of tinnitus states that when the cochlear hair cells become damaged, they begin randomly sending electrical signals to the brain. It's basically the same as hearing loss, and often tinnitus and hearing loss go hand in hand and occur simultaneously. So this does make sense. I think that's probably what's going on. Tinnitus is a pretty horrendous thing to have to live with, so this section I dedicate to anyone out there with tinnitus. If you know anyone with it, please send them this video, article, and podcast episode. So the question we're going to explore now is, can red light alleviate ringing in the ears of people with tinnitus? In a 2014 study, researchers tested low-level laser therapy on 120 human patients with untreatable tinnitus and hearing loss. Patients were divided into 2 groups. Group 1 received laser therapy treatment for 20 sessions consisting of 20 minutes each. Group 2 was the control group. They thought they received the laser treatment, but power to devices was switched off. And the results? The mean difference of severity of tinnitus between the 2 groups was statistically significant at the end of the study and 3 months after completion of treatment. Low-level laser radiation is effective for short-term treatment of tinnitus caused by sensorineural hearing loss, and its impact may be reduced over time. So there you go. There's enormous hope for people with tinnitus. This is the final section of this presentation that we're going to go over: dietary nutrients for preventing and reversing hearing loss. The National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey documented significant relationships between dietary quality and auditory sensitivity at high frequencies. Here are some dietary and lifestyle changes you can make in order to improve the quality of your hearing and increase your resistance to hearing loss from various stressors as well as aging. So vitamins and essential nutrients are such that you cannot get them in any other way. You have to get them and obtain them through diet. So if you're not eating certain nutrients, you're going to be deficient, and that's going to cause problems. There's a reason why they're essential. It's because you need them. Let's go over these. I've got 3 different nutrients and lifestyle factors that you can change in order to optimize your hearing. Army personnel with noise-induced hearing loss or noise-induced hearing loss and tinnitus were found to have lower vitamin B12 levels than normal hearing subjects. Foods highest in B12 include fish, animal livers, whether it's fish or land-based, is really high in vitamin B12. Shellfish, like oysters, and I got a picture of a lobster up here on the screen. Lots of butter on there. And a steak is really high in B12. And eggs are another food really high in B12. I think if you ate the shell and you fed the hens lots of fruit so that the fat inside the yolk would be highly saturated, Eggs are probably the most perfect food. Now, if anyone out there is vegan and you're looking for a source of B12, the only vegan source would be brewer's yeast. Brewer's yeast is actually pretty high in all B vitamins, especially niacinamide, and it's very beneficial. Dr. Raymond Peat talks about how his father was diagnosed with diabetes, and he really did not want to be dependent on an insulin shot every day. So he did some research and discovered brewer's yeast. So he started consuming brewer's yeast for a 2-week period, just brewer's yeast. And I think he withered away down to like 90 pounds. But in the end, he actually recovered his health completely. The brewer's yeast had this medicinal effect. His diabetes went away. Other than that, if you're vegan, the only way to get vitamin B12 is to get an injection every week of synthetic vitamin B12. Pharmaceutical companies can't give you natural vitamin B12 because they can't patent that. So, yeah, you're going to get a synthetic source of vitamin B12, and there's probably excipients and contaminants in there as well, so that's not a really good option. Anyway, smokers have a higher risk of developing high-frequency hearing loss than non-smokers with a similar occupational noise exposure. So, probably not surprising to most, but not smoking can improve your hearing now and long into the future as well. And last but not least, in military settings where exposure to loud noises are inevitable, a significant correlation was found between noise-induced hearing loss and serum magnesium concentrations in Air Force pilots. So magnesium is another critical mineral for hearing. So which foods contain the most magnesium? We've got coconut water is really high in magnesium. Once again, we got eggs has made the list. Spinach is another great source of magnesium. It's also a good source of calcium as well, but make sure you cook it. Raw plant matter and raw leaves, 1, have poisons in them, and 2, because you can't digest the cellulose or that fiber, will actually feed bacteria in your gut, which will then convert them into endotoxin. Coffee is another great source of magnesium. Yogurt and dairy are also really high in magnesium as well. Cows literally just stand out on pasture eating grass, which is really high in magnesium and calcium all day. So not surprisingly, their milk and their dairy is high in magnesium and calcium. Try to get Greek if possible because it has less lactic acid on the top as well, which is a negative effect on your health. So Greek is the way to go. Mushrooms are also high in magnesium. Potatoes and raw fruit in general are pretty high in magnesium as well. But melons in particular have a high level of magnesium, so that's a really great choice and a great source of magnesium if you're looking for some. That's all we got for today. If you enjoyed this presentation, please share it with someone you love. If you want to learn more, check out my books. I've written 3 of them, 1 on red light therapy and 2 on cancer. And if you want to take a look at those, just go to EndAllDisease.com/books. Also check out our red light therapy store. We've got the handheld device, the Body Light Mini, and the full body light for the ultimate red light therapy experience. Go to EndAllDisease.com/store to take a look at those. And for the show notes and to sign up to our mailing list, you'll get 3 free ebooks just for joining. Go to EndAllDisease.com/episode 13. As always, thank you for tuning in. Goodbye, God bless, be safe, be healthy, and we will see you in the next episode.